When it comes to incredible stories, this one simply cannot be overlooked, as such events are truly worth sharing with the whole world. This incident took place in Italy in 1939. Leonarda Cianciulli, a soap vendor from Correjo, offered her fragrant products to the townspeople and, at the same time, treated them to homemade cookies. However, the ingredients in these goods were somewhat unusual, but this only became known much later. Leonarda Cianciulli was born on November 14, 1893, in Mantelle, a town in the Italian province of Avellino. From an early age, she suffered from a lack of maternal love. Her mother, Emilia, truly did not love her, as Leonardo was the product of abuse, and so she often treated her poorly and even beat her. The problem was that every time her mother looked at her, Leonardo reminded her of the reason she had married a man she did not love. At a very young age, Leonardo tried to take her own life twice, hoping to escape the relentless abuse and beatings that had become unbearable. In 1914, after meeting a young man named Raphael Pansardi, a postal worker, she decided to marry him. More than anything, she wanted to leave her parental home, so she did not hesitate for a second. However, her parents were against this marriage, as they had planned to marry her off to her cousin. After the wedding, Leonardo's mother was so furious with her that she cursed her for the rest of her life. Leonardo pretended not to care and settled with her husband in the small town of Laurey in Alta Irpinia. On the surface, everything seemed fine for the couple, but just a few years after the wedding, Raphael began drinking heavily. Her family appeared completely normal. The 4 children behaved well in school and had many friends. Despite her divorce, Leonardo never forbade her ex-husband from seeing the children. She also enjoyed inviting her neighbors over for tea and desserts. Everything changed abruptly when one of Leonardo's sons, Giuseppe, her favorite, decided to join the Italian army during World War II. From that moment, she was consumed by anxiety. Her son's departure filled her with an overwhelming sense of sorrow and fear, and her superstitious nature convinced her that it was time to turn to the occult to protect him. This is how Leonardo devised a dark and sinister plan that involved offering human sacrifices to safeguard the young man from any harm. To bring her ideas to life, she used tarot cards, which proved to be a perfect way to attract the attention of her victims. At some point, Leonardo realized that she wouldn't even have to search for future victims herself. 3 of her friends came to her house regularly. Being lonely and older women, they sought comfort and advice from the attentive Leonardo. Among the 3 friends were Francesca Clementina Suavi, an unmarried woman who looked after the children of her neighborhood; Virginia Cacioppo, a former opera singer who had traveled to various parts of the world and gained a certain reputation; and Ermelinda Faustino Setti, a semi-literate villager with a submissive yet quarrelsome temperament. The 3 of them frequently gathered at Leonardo's house, chatting late into the evenings. The fear of losing her son drove Leonardo to act immediately. She made a decision and promised herself that she would carry it out before it became too late, before she could never see her beloved son again. Her first victim was Ermelinda Faustino Setti. She perished at Leonardo's hands on December 17, 1939. In their final conversations, Leonardo foretold her sudden marriage. One day, Ermelinda visited Leonardo once more, and from that moment on, no one ever saw her again. On the eve of that day, Ermelinda Faustino Setti asked a neighbor if she could take care of her cats for a few days, as she needed to leave town. The tarot cards laid out by Leonardo had promised her a meeting with the love of her life. On that day, December 17th, she spent a long time getting ready. Ermelinda styled an elaborate hairdo, applied makeup, and spritzed her entire body with perfume. She looked visibly excited and even confided to some acquaintances that she was getting married and moving to a city in southern Italy. The last time the residents of Correjo saw her was when she entered Leonardo's house. Once inside, she disappeared. Her absence, however, did not arouse suspicion, as many believed she had likely gone to meet the love of her life and had stopped by to say goodbye to her best friend, when in reality, the situation was entirely different. Leonardo convinced her friend that she was going to meet her future husband in the town of Pule, claiming that this man was a friend of hers who had supposedly dreamed of meeting Ermelinda. Seizing the moment, Leonardo asked her friend to let her manage her belongings during her absence and made her sign a notarized letter stating that Leonardo would remain in charge of her savings. She also instructed Ermelinda not to tell anyone, in order to avoid gossip and misfortune. However, she suggested that Ermelinda write letters to her friends so that, once she left, her friend could deliver them on her behalf. Leonardo also added that she would be pleased if Ermelinda stopped by to say goodbye before her departure. When Leonardo met Ermelinda at the door, the young woman looked happy and well-dressed. The hostess offered her guest a glass of wine into which she had mixed a sleeping drug. As soon as Ermelinda fell asleep, Leonardo dragged her into a small room, took an axe, and dismembered the body into 9 pieces. She then took 2 basins she had prepared in advance, placed the body parts inside them, and filled a cauldron purchased specifically for slow boiling with water, setting it over the fire. Next, she added 7 kilograms of caustic soda to the cauldron along with the body parts. Leonardo stirred the mixture until the fragments dissolved completely and turned black. She then poured the resulting substance into buckets and left it to settle. Examining the mixture, Leonardo paused for a moment and said, "Now we have enough soap for 6 months." As for the victim's blood, she waited for it to coagulate and then placed it in the oven to dry. Afterward, the murderer mixed this ingredient with flour, added sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs. She carefully mixed everything and baked crispy cookies, which she served to her next guests, ate herself, and even shared with her children. Ermelinda's disappearance went unnoticed. The neighbors remembered that she had planned to move to Pule, and since she was unmarried, no one searched for her or suspected anything amiss. Everything proceeded as usual. But 9 months later, on September 5, 1940, Leonardo decided to repeat her plan and claim another victim. This time, it was Francesca Clementina Suavi. Shortly before the next murder, Leonardo told her friend that she would soon leave Correjo to take the position of headmistress at a boarding school in Piancette, because a friend of hers, the school director, was ready to have her replace him. Just like the first time, Leonardo advised her second victim not to share the good news with anyone, so as not to jinx her luck. Instead, she suggested that Francesca send postcards to her relatives, explaining that she would have to leave due to her new position in Piancette. This time, Leonardo also offered her friend the role of managing her assets and being responsible for selling them if necessary. Everything else followed the same plan. Francesca stopped by Leonardo's house to say goodbye, drank wine laced with a sleeping drug, and was then killed. Leonardo dismembered her and incorporated her into the soap and the now popular cookie recipe that everyone loved. Francesca Clementina's disappearance aroused no suspicion, as all her acquaintances knew she had found a good job and hadn't had time to say goodbye, except for entrusting her savings to Leonardo. 2 months later, on November 30th, 1940, when Leonardo decided that her sacrifices were indeed effective, she prepared to execute her plan for a third time. This time, her victim was 59-year-old soprano Virginia Catiopo. According to the tarot cards, Virginia's fate was about to change. Leonardo told her that a secretary familiar with the singing field was needed by the theater manager in Florence, and that he was supposedly ready to offer the position to Virginia. As before, Leonardo instructed her friend not to tell anyone about it, just as she had done with her previous 2 victims. But the future victim immediately began sharing the wonderful news with her closest relatives. At noon on November 30th, Leonardo opened the door of her house to Virginia. Little did anyone know that at that very moment, Virginia's daughter-in-law was watching her enter the house and never come out again. Everything was carried out just as in the previous two cases, except that this time, Virginia acted with much more knowledge of the process. She not only threw the dismembered body into the boiling cauldron, but also added a bottle of cologne. The scent that emanated was exquisite. After a few hours, Leonardo managed to prepare an excellent soap with a creamy texture. She then returned to making her desserts so popular and delicious that those who tasted them called them a true masterpiece, while Leonardo claimed they were her own signature recipe. A few days later, she began distributing pieces of soap to her neighbors and treating them to her famous cookies. The woman took pride in the recognition she received from the townspeople, who saw her as a kind-hearted person always ready to help. Meanwhile, Virginia's daughter-in-law, Albertina Fanti, grew concerned over her mother-in-law's sudden disappearance. There wasn't even an address where she could be found, which seemed unusual to Albertina, as her relative had always behaved differently. She decided to officially report Virginia's disappearance to the head of the Correjo police. During questioning, Albertina mentioned that the last time she had seen Virginia, she had visited Leonarda Cianciulli. Investigations revealed that Leonardo's two other friends had also vanished without a trace. Further inquiries uncovered the grim details of this criminal case, which was not only shocking, but also caused widespread fear throughout the district. Almost every resident had eaten Leonardo's cookies or used the soap that contained the remains of her victims. During a search of Leonardo's home, police discovered the jewelry and other belongings of the three women hidden beneath the brickwork. They also found the dentures of all three victims. In the room, they found 3 axes, several knives, and a cauldron, into which the criminal had submerged the bodies to make soap. All of these tools and utensils are now preserved at the Criminology Museum, Vremya. When confronted with the evidence, Leonardo confessed to her crimes, revealing the methodical sequence of her actions, which began with convincing her victims that a bright future awaited them in the form of a desired job or love. Once the victims fell into the trap, they were willing to leave all their possessions to Leonardo. She would then offer them a glass of wine laced with a sleeping drug. As soon as the women fell asleep, Leonardo took an axe and killed them, after which she dismembered the bodies in a basin to later boil them into soap. From the victims' blood, she baked her desserts. Following the search, investigators contacted the 2 men whom Clementina and Virginia had supposedly intended to visit, suspecting a potential criminal conspiracy. However, further investigation cleared these men of any involvement. Of course, they suspected nothing. Leonardo's son was also arrested on suspicion of being an accomplice, as the police could not believe that the woman had acted alone. After spending 5 years in prison awaiting trial, her son Giuseppe was released due to insufficient evidence. Leonardo tried to convince the jury that her son had nothing to do with the crime and that she alone bore full responsibility. She was taken to the morgue to help clear her son of any involvement and to prove that she was the sole perpetrator. Incredibly, the autopsy of the body took Leonardo only 12 minutes. The trial began on June 12, 1946. During the proceedings, Leonardo tried to justify her actions by claiming that she was paying a blood tribute in memory of her deceased mother. According to her, her mother appeared to her in dreams and threatened to take the lives of her children if she did not, in return, sacrifice the innocent lives of others. At one point, a medical examiner stated that Leonardo would not have been able to turn her victims' bodies into soap, but the woman stood up and said, "If anyone present in this courtroom brings me a body of any age, I can prove it easily." A few days after the trial began, Leonardo was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison and an additional 3 years in the women's psychiatric facility in Pakuwoli, where she died of a stroke on October 15, 1970, at the age of 77. During her lifetime and after her death, numerous books were published about her case, the most famous being Confession of a Bitter Soul. Leonardo earned the nickname Malavara Iscareggio. It stands as an astonishing case. No one could have imagined that the woman everyone knew as kind and helpful was capable of committing such acts, and even involving the entire community, making people eat cookies and bathe with soap containing the bodies of her victims.